Have you ever found yourself caught between an unexpected proposition and your own moral compass? That moment when someone offers you something that seems tempting, but deep down, you know there's a better path. The evening air carried the scent of expensive perfume and champagne as Thomas adjusted his tie, feeling out of place at the company's annual gala. As a senior project manager who'd rather be home reading bedtime stories to his daughter, these corporate events were his personal version of purgatory. But attendance wasn't optional, especially when you're trying to secure a promotion to provide a better life for your child. Thomas had been a single father for 3 years now. His wife hadn't died. That would have been simpler to explain to their daughter, Sophia. Instead, Claire had simply decided that motherhood and marriage weren't for her, leaving behind a note and divorce papers on a Tuesday morning. No warning, no proper goodbye to their 4-year-old daughter. Just gone, pursuing her career in another country, sending occasional gifts that never quite filled the void she'd left. The ballroom of the Grand Meridian Hotel glittered with chandeliers and the forced laughter of colleagues pretending to enjoy each other's company outside office hours. Thomas nursed his single glass of whiskey, planning his strategic exit for exactly 1 hour and 15 minutes after arrival, long enough to be seen by the right people, short enough to make it home before Sophia's babysitter needed to leave. "You clean up nicely, Thomas. Almost didn't recognize you without a spreadsheet in front of your face." The voice belonged to Rosabelle Carter, CEO of Carter Innovations and, for the past 8 months, Thomas's direct supervisor. At 35, she was unusually young for her position, but her business acumen was legendary in the industry. She wore a deep burgundy dress that complemented her olive skin, her dark hair swept up in an elegant style that revealed diamond earrings worth more than Thomas's monthly salary. "Thank you, Miss Carter. You look..." Thomas paused, searching for a word professional enough for his boss yet honest enough not to sound insincere. "Remarkable." Rosabelle laughed, the sound genuine among the artificial social niceties surrounding them. "After hours, it's just Rosabelle, remember? And thank you. I had to make an impression tonight." Thomas nodded, unsure what to say next. Their relationship had always been strictly professional. Rosabelle was brilliant, demanding, and fair, the kind of boss who pushed you to your limits because she somehow knew those limits were further than you believed. He respected her immensely, but they rarely discussed anything beyond quarterly projections and client acquisitions. "Would you like another drink?" she asked, gesturing to his nearly empty glass. "I should probably stick to one. I'm driving, and Sophia's sitter can only stay until 11. "Ah, yes. Sophia." Rosabelle's expression softened. "How old is she now?" 7. Going on 17, if her attitude lately is any indication. "The challenging years are just beginning," Rosabelle said with a knowing smile. "My sister has 3 teenagers. She says she misses the tantrums of toddlerhood." Thomas laughed. "That's not reassuring." A shift in Rosabelle's demeanor caught Thomas's attention. Her posture stiffened, and her eyes fixed on something, or someone, across the room. Following her gaze, Thomas spotted a tall man in an impeccably tailored suit, his arm wrapped possessively around a woman who couldn't have been more than 25. "That's Alexander," Rosabelle said quietly, not taking her eyes off the couple. "My ex-husband. And his new fiancée, Vanessa. 24 years old and apparently the love of his life, unlike his wife of 8 years. The bitterness in her voice surprised Thomas. Rosabelle always seemed so composed, so in control. This glimpse of vulnerability was unexpected. "I'm sorry," Thomas offered, not knowing what else to say. "Don't be. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago. I'm completely over it." Her words contradicted the intensity with which she watched Alexander whisper something in Vanessa's ear, making the young woman giggle. The orchestra in the corner of the ballroom transitioned from ambient background music to something more suitable for dancing. Several couples moved to the center of the room, including Alexander and Vanessa. Rosabelle's knuckles whitened around her champagne flute. "Dance with me." Thomas blinked, certain he'd misheard. I'm sorry. Dance with me, she repeated, turning to face him fully. My ex is watching, and I refuse to be the pathetic divorcee hiding in the corner while he parades his child bride around. Miss Carter, Rosabelle, I don't think. Please, Thomas. There was something in her eyes, not just anger or pride, but a flash of genuine hurt. Just one dance. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Thomas hesitated. He wasn't much of a dancer, and mixing personal dynamics with professional relationships seemed unwise. But the vulnerability in Rosabelle's request was so unlike her usual confident demeanor that he found himself nodding. One dance, he agreed. Relief washed over her face. Thank you. And don't worry, there's a reward in it for you. That's not necessary. A kiss, she said, leaning closer. At the end of the dance. Just enough to make Alexander realize what he gave up. And enough to make the board members stop pitying me as the woman who couldn't keep her husband interested. Thomas froze. Rosabelle, I can't do that. Why not? Are you seeing someone? No, but... Then what's the problem? It's just for show. Thomas took a deep breath. The problem is that I respect you too much for that kind of game. And I respect myself too much, too. Rosabelle's expression hardened. It's just a dance and a kiss, Thomas. I'm not asking you to compromise your integrity. But you are, he said quietly. You're asking me to help you make someone jealous. To use me as a prop in a personal vendetta. You're better than that, Rosabelle. Her eyes widened slightly, surprise replacing the determination that had been there moments before. You can do better than letting him still have this power over you, Thomas continued. You're Rosabelle Carter. You built this company from the ground up. You don't need to prove anything to him or anyone else in this room. For a moment, Thomas was certain he'd overstepped. This woman controlled his professional future, and he just refused her request and lectured her on personal dignity. But instead of anger, something else flickered across Rosabelle's face, recognition, perhaps. Or respect. You're right, she said finally, setting her champagne flute on a passing server's tray. I am better than this. Thank you for the reminder. Thomas nodded, relief washing over him. For what it's worth, I'd be happy to dance with you, just as colleagues, no ulterior motives. Because you want to dance, not because you want to make someone else jealous. A genuine smile replaced the tight expression she'd worn moments before. I'd like that, actually. As Thomas led Rosabelle to the dance floor, he caught Alexander watching them, his expression unreadable. But Thomas wasn't dancing for Alexander's benefit. He was dancing with a remarkable woman who deserved better than to measure her worth through her ex-husband's eyes. The music swelled around them as Thomas placed his hand respectfully on Rosabelle's waist, maintaining a professional distance as they moved to the rhythm. He wasn't a skilled dancer, but years of dancing with Sophia standing on his feet had given him enough practice not to embarrass himself. You have integrity, Thomas, Rosabelle said as they moved across the floor. It's rare in this industry. In people generally. I have a daughter watching everything I do, he replied simply. She's learning how to move through the world by watching me navigate it. I can't afford to compromise. Rosabelle nodded thoughtfully. Tell me about her, about Sophia. As they danced, Thomas found himself sharing stories about his daughter, her obsession with space exploration, her recent science fair project on plant growth, her struggle with multiplication tables. Rosabelle listened with genuine interest, asking questions that revealed she was truly engaged in the conversation. By the time the music ended, Alexander and his fiancée were forgotten. Rosabelle was laughing at Thomas's recounting of Sophia's disastrous attempt to make breakfast in bed for his birthday, which had resulted in maple syrup in places of the kitchen he was still discovering months later. She sounds wonderful, Rosabelle said as they walked off the dance floor. You've done an amazing job raising her on your own. I'm trying, Thomas admitted. Some days I feel like I'm failing her completely. That's how you know you're doing it right, Rosabelle said. The parents who think they have it all figured out are usually the ones missing something important. Their conversation continued as they found a quiet corner away from the main crowd. For the first time, Thomas saw Rosabelle as more than his intimidating boss. She was a person with her own struggles, insecurities, and strengths. She shared stories of her own childhood, her parents' difficult marriage, and how it had shaped her views on relationships. I think that's why Alexander's betrayal hit so hard, she admitted. I thought we were different. I thought we'd broken the cycle. It's not your failure that he couldn't be who you needed him to be, Thomas said. Some people aren't capable of the commitment they promise. Rosabelle studied him for a moment. Like Sophia's mother? Thomas nodded, surprised by how easily Rosabelle had made the connection. Claire wasn't ready for the reality of parenthood. She loved the idea of having a family, but the day-to-day responsibility was too much. I don't blame her anymore. Some people aren't meant to be parents. But you were. I didn't know I was until I had to be, Thomas said honestly. When Claire left, I was terrified. I had no idea how to raise a child alone. But Sophia needed me to figure it out, so I did. That's courage, Rosabelle said softly. The evening continued, and Thomas forgot about his planned early exit. They talked about work, but also books they'd read, places they'd traveled, dreams they still harbored. When Thomas finally checked his watch, he was shocked to see it was nearly midnight. I need to go, he said, standing abruptly. The sitter. Of course, Rosabelle said, rising as well. I've kept you far too long. No, Thomas paused. I enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for that. Rosabelle smiled. I did too. More than I expected to enjoy anything tonight. As they walked toward the exit, Alexander appeared in their path, his young fiancée nowhere to be seen. Rosabelle, he said, his voice carrying the slight slur of someone who'd had too much champagne. You look stunning tonight. Thank you, Alexander, Rosabelle replied coolly. Congratulations on your engagement. Alexander's eyes shifted to Thomas, assessing him with thinly veiled contempt. And who's this? The new conquest? Before Thomas could respond, Rosabelle stepped slightly forward. This is Thomas Parker, one of the most valuable members of my executive team. And a friend. The simple word, friend, carried weight that Thomas hadn't expected. Alexander seemed to deflate slightly, perhaps disappointed that he hadn't provoked a stronger reaction. Well, enjoy your evening, Alexander said finally, moving past them toward the bar. Outside the hotel, as they waited for the valet to bring their respective cars, Rosabelle turned to Thomas. Thank you, she said. Not just for the dance, but for reminding me who I am. You already knew, Thomas replied. You just needed someone to reflect it back to you. Rosabelle's car arrived first, a sleek black luxury sedan. As the valet held the door open, she turned back to Thomas. The quarterly review meeting on Monday, I'd like you to present the new client acquisition strategy. I think the board needs to hear directly from the person who developed it. Thomas blinked in surprise. That presentation was typically Rosabelle's domain, her chance to showcase the company's growth strategy to the board of directors. Offering him that platform was no small gesture. I'd be honored, he said. Good. And Thomas? Rosabelle hesitated, something uncharacteristically uncertain in her expression. Would you and Sophia like to join me for brunch on Sunday? There's a place in the Park District that has an excellent children's menu and a science-themed play area. Sophia might enjoy it. The invitation caught Thomas off guard. That sounds nice, but, is that appropriate? Given our professional relationship? Rosabelle smiled. I think we established tonight that we can be both colleagues and friends. Unless you're uncomfortable with the idea? No, Thomas said, realizing he meant it. I think Sophia would love that. And so would I. Good. I'll text you the details. Rosabelle slid into her car, but paused before closing the door. And Thomas? You were right. I can do better than using someone to make my ex jealous. Thank you for believing that. As Thomas drove home that night, he reflected on the unexpected turn the evening had taken. What had begun as an uncomfortable corporate obligation had transformed into something meaningful, perhaps the beginning of a friendship, or maybe something more in time. Whatever it became, it would be built on mutual respect and genuine connection, not games or pretense. When he arrived home, the babysitter was asleep on the couch, a textbook open on her lap. Thomas gently woke her, paid her extra for staying late, and then checked on Sophia. His daughter was sprawled across her bed, one arm wrapped around her favorite stuffed astronaut, her dark curls a wild tangle against the pillow. Thomas adjusted her blanket and placed a gentle kiss on her forehead. I love you, Starlight, he whispered, using the nickname that had stuck since her space obsession began. As if hearing him in her dreams, Sophia smiled slightly in her sleep. In that moment, Thomas knew with absolute certainty that he had made the right choice that evening. Every decision he made shaped not just his life, but the person his daughter would become. By choosing integrity over momentary gratification, by valuing genuine connection over games and pretense, he was teaching Sophia the most important lesson of all, that true worth comes from within, not from how others see you. And perhaps, in the process, he had found someone who valued those same principles, someone who might become an important part of both their lives. The story of Thomas, Sophia, and Rosabelle was just beginning. Like all meaningful relationships, it would have its challenges and complications. But it was founded on something real, on seeing each other clearly and choosing to be their best selves, not despite their past wounds but because of the strength those wounds had helped them discover. Sometimes the most powerful words aren't "dance with me" or "kiss me." Sometimes, the most powerful words are "you can do better," because they reflect a belief in someone's true worth, in their capacity to rise above their pain and find something genuine. As dawn broke over the city 3 weeks later, Thomas stood in his kitchen, carefully arranging blueberries into a smiley face atop Sophia's pancakes. The morning routine had evolved recently. He found himself waking earlier, taking more care with breakfast, even ironing his shirts the night before rather than rushing through it in the morning. Small changes, but meaningful ones. Is Rosabelle coming over tonight? Sophia asked, padding into the kitchen in mismatched socks and her favorite space-themed pajamas. Yes, for dinner. And she's bringing that telescope she told you about, Thomas replied, setting the plate in front of his daughter. Sophia's face lit up. The one that can see Jupiter's moons? That's the one. But remember, we might not see them if it's cloudy. It won't be cloudy, Sophia declared with the absolute certainty only a 7-year-old could muster. I asked the universe very specifically for clear skies. Thomas smiled, ruffling her hair. Well, who can argue with that? The past 3 weeks had unfolded in unexpected ways. Sunday brunch had led to a walk through the botanical gardens, which led to Sophia inviting Rosabelle to her school science fair, which led to dinner at Thomas's modest suburban home. Each interaction revealed new layers to Rosabelle, her patience with Sophia's endless questions, her genuine interest in their lives, her vulnerability when sharing stories from her own childhood. The professional boundaries remained clear at work. If anything, Rosabelle was more demanding of Thomas's department, pushing them toward excellence with unwavering standards. But there was a new understanding between them, a mutual respect that transcended corporate hierarchy. Dad? Sophia's voice pulled Thomas from his thoughts. Do you like Rosabelle? Like her? Thomas nearly spilled his coffee. What makes you ask that? Sophia rolled her eyes dramatically. Because you smile different when she's around. And you laughed at her joke about quantum physics even though you didn't understand it. I didn't understand it either, but she explained it to me later. Did she now? Thomas said, both amused and touched by the private conversation between his daughter and Rosabel. She said it was okay if I didn't get it because most grown-ups don't either. But she thinks I could be a physicist someday if I wanted to. Sophia stabbed a blueberry with her fork. So do you? Like her? Thomas considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. I think Rosabel is an extraordinary person. And yes, I enjoy spending time with her very much. That's not what I asked, Sophia said, fixing him with a penetrating stare that reminded him so much of Claire it was almost painful. I know, Thomas admitted. The truth is, I'm still figuring that out. Adult relationships are complicated. Because of Mom? The question hung in the air between them. They didn't talk about Claire often, not because Thomas discouraged it, but because Sophia rarely brought her up. Partly, Thomas said carefully. When someone leaves the way your mom did, it can make it hard to trust again. Sophia nodded thoughtfully. But Rosabel wouldn't leave. She promised to help me build my science fair project next year. That's a whole year away. Thomas smiled at his daughter's logic. That is a good sign, isn't it? And she looks at you the way Ms. Peterson looks at the librarian. What? Who's Ms. Peterson? My art teacher, Sophia said, as if this should be obvious. She likes the librarian, Mr. Abernathy. Everyone knows it except him. They're always finding reasons to talk to each other, and she laughs too loud at his jokes, and her face gets all soft when he's around. Thomas was momentarily speechless at his daughter's observational skills. And you think Rosabel looks at me that way? Duh, Sophia said, returning to her pancakes. Grown-ups are so slow sometimes. Later that evening, after a dinner of homemade lasagna, Thomas's specialty, and a backyard astronomy session that had Sophia buzzing with excitement about the 4 tiny dots of light orbiting Jupiter, Thomas found himself alone with Rosabel on the porch swing. Sophia had finally been persuaded to go to bed, extracting a promise from Rosabel to bring star chart printouts on her next visit. She's extraordinary, Rosabel said, watching the stars overhead. Her mind works in such fascinating ways. She thinks you're pretty extraordinary too, Thomas replied. She's never connected with an adult outside of family the way she has with you. Rosabel smiled, the porch light casting a warm glow across her features. Gone was the intimidating CEO in designer clothes. Here was just Rosabel, in jeans and a sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. Can I tell you something? She asked, her voice soft in the night air. Of course. That night at the gala, when I asked you to dance with me to make Alexander jealous, I'm so grateful you said no. Thomas turned to look at her. You are? If you had gone along with it, we might have shared a dance and a kiss, and it would have meant nothing. It would have been about him, not us. Rosabel met his gaze. Instead, you gave me something far more valuable. You reminded me of who I want to be. And who is that? Thomas asked. Someone who doesn't need validation from others to know her worth. Someone who builds connections based on what's real, not what looks good to others. She paused. Someone worthy of a man who refuses to compromise his integrity, even when it would be easier to go along. The weight of her words settled between them, full of possibility. Sophia asked me this morning if I like you, Thomas admitted with a small laugh. Rosabel's eyebrows rose. Like? That's serious terminology in second-grade circles. What did you tell her? That adult relationships are complicated. Ah, the classic parental dodge. Not entirely, Thomas said. I also told her that I think you're extraordinary, and that I enjoy spending time with you very much. Both true statements, Rosabel said, her voice softening. She also informed me that you look at me the way her art teacher looks at the school librarian, apparently a well-known unrequited office romance. Rosabel laughed, the sound carrying into the night. The observational skills of children are terrifying. They really are. A comfortable silence fell between them, the porch swing creaking gently as they gazed at the star-filled sky. Thomas felt Rosabel's hand find his, their fingers intertwining naturally, as if they'd done this 100 times before. "I'm not in a rush," she said quietly. "After Alexander, I promised myself I wouldn't leap into anything without being sure. And you have Sophia to consider." "I appreciate that," Thomas replied, squeezing her hand gently. "Whatever this becomes, it needs to develop at its own pace." Rosabel nodded. "But I do like you, Thomas Parker. Quite a lot, actually." Thomas felt a smile spread across his face, a lightness in his chest that had been absent for longer than he cared to admit. "I like you too, Rosabel Carter." As they sat together under the vast canopy of stars, Thomas thought about the strange, winding path that had led them here. If Rosabel hadn't asked him to dance that night, if he hadn't found the courage to say what he truly believed, they might never have discovered what existed beneath the surface of their professional relationship. Sometimes the most meaningful connections begin not with a kiss, but with the courage to say no to the wrong thing so you can say yes to what truly matters. And sometimes, the universe conspires to bring together two people who have learned the hard way that authenticity is the only foundation worth building upon. Above them, Jupiter shone brightly, its ancient light a reminder that some things are worth waiting for, worth seeing clearly, worth the journey it takes to truly discover them. If this story touched your heart, remember that we all face moments where we must choose between what's easy and what's right. Between playing games and standing in our truth. Between settling for less and believing we deserve more. Hit that subscribe button for more stories that explore the complicated, beautiful mess of human connection, and leave a comment sharing a time when you chose integrity over convenience. Your story matters too.